So we are here with Erin Buckley, who is a Republican candidate for state representative, 19th Middlesex District. First off, thank you for taking the time out of your busy campaign schedule to sit down with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
The first question I kind of ask everyone is, what prompted your decision to run at this time? What made you say this is the right time to make what I'm assuming is your first foray into running for office?
That's exactly right. I have not run for an elected seat before. I'm an appointed official in town on different boards and whatnot, but not an elected official. So I had been asked several times in the years prior if I was interested in running. I was really pleased with the job that Representative Maselli was doing. As a Republican, some of his big issues are my big issues. He's pro-life, he supports the death penalty, his gun rights. Those are big issues for me. And so I always said, I'm not going to run against a man I support. If this were someone I thought was doing a poor job, or that I didn't think was a good representative, sure, but that was not the case with Representative Maselli. So when he passed away, unfortunately, that left a big chasm, in terms of representation for both Tewksbury and Wilmington. And I thought that we needed, a viable Republican candidate to run for the position, which is why I very quietly pulled papers and I got my signatures, and tried to be as respectful as possible to both towns, to Representative Maselli's family and everyone involved. And I, grinded it out.
The relative to Representative Maselli, he always was considered a more of a moderate Democrat. There certainly were issues where he tended to be on the conservative side. You mentioned that he tended to be pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, that type of thing. Do you see that as something of a rarity now in Massachusetts, where there are not a lot of, I guess, what you consider conservative Democrats or moderate Democrats out there?
Sure. So I think for Tewksbury and Wilmington, we're a pretty moderate/conservative district. So I think that there are plenty of those within, those Dems within our community. When I was legislative aide to Representative Will Crocker, the freshman class of representatives that were, we call it the bullpen. It's where they house all of the freshman reps in one room until committee assignments are given and people are moved around, and then you get an office. So it takes 3 or 4 months for you to really get into your own permanent office. And so part of the freshman class was a large portion of them, if maybe not all of them, were progressives, self-identifying progressives. Bernie supporters,
Sure.
People who self-identified that way. So I think that there are, for Dems, for Democrats, there is a growing population of liberals, of very progressive liberals who would maybe not self-identify as moderate. And so, again, I think that is maybe outside of the district, but I do see, and I think if you look at the Democrat convention, I think that becomes more and more apparent that outside really of the 19th or part of Worcester County or part of the pockets of pretty conservative areas within the state, you're moving more progressively to the left.
Tell me a little bit about, I don't want to go too far afield before I give you a chance to talk about your background, because you clearly have had a passion for public service and politics for quite some time. Tell us a little bit about your background in politics and also in service here within Tewksbury.
Sure. So I moved to Tewksbury in 2011, right before I got married. My husband is a lifelong Tewksbury resident, and so kind of right off the bat, My husband was already volunteering at the food pantry, so I would go with him, a couple of times a month to volunteer. And once you really become part of a community, and this is my home, we own our house, this is where I live, this is my home, you want to give back. I wasn't really, we moved around a lot when I was a kid, so I never really had that sense of community as a child. And once it was instilled in me as an adult, I recognized that you're part of the solution of making everything work, and I really felt very passionately about that. Shortly after that, I applied and got on to the Mass Cultural Council and the Friends of the Tewksbury Library, who the Friends do just really amazing work. Without them, without the money that they raise, none of the programming at the library would be possible. And Diane and Robert do a great job of ensuring that there is a selection of programming, movie nights, guest speakers. Nathaniel Hawthorne just came, and I think that's great. So those are two boards, and then volunteering at the food pantry, one of the gentlemen I volunteer with was on the finance committee, and he was like, I think this would be a really great fit for you. I had just graduated from Salem State, and I was like, all right, let me check this out. I applied and I interviewed, and it's really one of the more rewarding things you can really do is to get involved in town. In the finance committee, you really kind of see what the fiscal health of the town really is, and you get into the nitty-gritty of all the different budgets and different aspects of the town. And I am also on the local housing partnership. For me, affordable housing for seniors and veterans and the disabled is really kind of a passion I feel very strongly about it, which I learned firsthand is at a premium. When I was legislative aide to Will Crocker, I learned very quickly that there are, 5, 6, 7 year waiting periods for folks to get into housing. And if we don't make that a priority now, we're going to see the wait times become 5, 6, 7 years. So, so that's part of my involvement in town.
And so you served as a legislative aide to Representative Crocker, and you also, when you decided to run, you stepped away from working on a congressional campaign for Rick Green. So you kind of had a chance to, you were kind of part of the process, you were part of the support, but then made the decision to kind of jump in more hands-on, to be the person, and now you're running the campaign. Have you found it to be, having worked on other people's campaigns, have you found it to be a different perspective being the candidate?
Oh, absolutely, because it's your name, it's your face, my family name. You're the one knocking doors and selling yourself. It's a lot different when you knock doors and you say, I work for this campaign and they're really great, versus being, this is my campaign and this is who I am and I want to help you and this is why I'm great, or this is why you should support me. It's very different. It's similar but very different in that you really have to, be proactive for yourself versus for somebody else.
People have a perception, I think, sometimes of what the Republican Party is and what Republicans are. In this particular race, the two Republican candidates, yourself and Pina Pritzvalli, are both young, female. Do you feel like that young women who are part of the Republican Party are kind of a forgotten demographic? Do people kind of assume that if you're young and female, you must be a liberal Democrat, and that maybe this is a voice that hasn't been heard too much?
Very much. I'm female. I look young. I'm not really that young, but I look young, and I'm active, and I'm energized, and I feel passionately about being involved. And I think that it's really easy and to assume that I would be liberal or I would be progressive. I'm because most young people are, but I think that if we push really good, solid candidates who have a passion for community service, who have a passion for being involved and being part of the solution, it really wouldn't be very difficult to see that young women do care about conservative issues. They do care about where your taxpayer dollars are going. They do care about your constitutional right to have access to a gun, or just your constitutional rights across the board. So it is interesting that when people say we need more women to run, they mean more Democrat women. They don't necessarily mean more Republican women. But I think it's great that more women. You see more women running for office. Tracy LaGore. There's a bunch of people running for Congress, for state Senate, for state rep across the Commonwealth, who, as Republicans, who I think you've not seen that many before. So I think it's really great.
There are a lot of, it does seem like there's a lot of first-time candidates out there, male and female, and that is a good thing.
Absolutely.
Good to get more people involved. As you mentioned about knocking on doors in Tewksbury and Wilmington, getting to know people, shaking hands. What are you hearing from residents when you talk to them? What are you hearing about what their big concerns are? What are they worried about?
So it kind of changes from like demographics. So younger families are concerned about their taxes. I think that's across the board. Everyone's concerned about property tax or taxes in general. But younger families are concerned about the schools. So mental health services. I feel passionately about funding libraries, specifically in Tewksbury. We have an opportunity, but families across the board are concerned about schools. They're concerned about how we can bring in businesses to maybe alleviate or create a supplemental tax base to take that pressure off of homeowners. Roads, everyone in the world is concerned about roads.
Sure.
And then older demographics really are concerned about being taxed out of their homes. So I've lived here my whole life. I've worked. I'm on a fixed income because I'm retired, and now my property tax continues to rise.
Sure.
And that's where that housing aspect of it comes in.
Right.
It's maybe not everything has to be 40B housing, but there is a section of the population who doesn't necessarily meet the criteria of 40B or are impoverished to that degree, but they can't afford a $500,000 condo.
Right.
And if you don't meet those needs of those folks as well, who are staying in their homes longer,
Right.
because again, it's a seller's market for housing, but who can afford a $500,000 condo?
Right.
So it really is, and like Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local, and so people are more concerned about what's going on really in their home and their community than they are, say, the Commonwealth wide, or
Right.
So that's kind of what I'm hearing.
One of the issues that seems to be permeating through the suburbs now, particularly in Middlesex County, it seems, is the opioid epidemic. It seems to be cutting across all demographics, rich, poor, old, young. As you approach this, and if you're given an opportunity to serve, what do you feel about? How do you feel about what is being done to combat the opioid epidemic, and what would you like to see done to better combat the opioid epidemic?
So I think that there's an opportunity in what's being done currently. So I think a lot of what we're seeing is self-medicating.
Right.
We're not addressing mental health needs. I think that there is a huge gap in what we're doing and what needs to be done in terms of meeting the needs of mental health needs of folks, and start to see those cracks maybe at late elementary, early middle school, and if we don't address those then, we run a real risk of seeing a detrimental impact on people's lives later. But in terms of really ground level fighting, what is a huge issue for the Commonwealth, the country as a whole, I think that we need to support things like a one-stop shop. So I answered, I think it was the Wilmington Apple asked, like, people write in and ask questions, and what would I do? And there is one on the Cape. There are several within the Commonwealth that kind of make it a one-stop shop. You have people who are in a really kind of fragile, delicate state. They're just getting clean. They're, it's rehab. But then we ask them to leave this building and then go to job training over here, and then go to, schooling over here, mental health needs over there. If you can bring it all together in one area and make it more of a campus environment versus you go here and there and here and there, I think we will see an increase in long-term sobriety, because you're not putting folks out who really need a little more support in the immediacy.
Yeah.
So that's something that, and also there are high schools where kids who are fighting addiction can go. And when I was in the State House, I went to a legislative briefing on those, and they're at a premium as well, and they're few and far between.
Sure.
I know that the Cape would really love one. I think that we could see a really positive impact from having one up in the Merrimack Valley or in the area, because we're seeing more and more teenagers, high school age, middle school age kids showing early signs of, addiction, and if we can stop it, and get them help that they need, I think that only makes the issue that much more manageable.
You touched on what I think is a huge issue, which is that next step after somebody has gone into rehab. Where do you go from here? Do we just throw people back on the streets, or do we give them support services? As I'm sure you're aware, there's plans from Into Action Recovery to have a residential facility, residential house here in Tewksbury. Is that a program? Is that a facility that you support and would work to get funding for it to help out?
So I know the Coopers. The Coopers live across the street from us. I've known them. My husband's known them almost his whole life, and they're wonderful. And I think they are fighting the good fight in terms of what needs to be done. Representative Maselli found it to be an area of passion and helped help secure funding for them.
Right.
I think that it is wonderful what they're doing. I don't necessarily blame the folks who live on Fox Run for being upset. If they had made, I knocked doors just recently there, and folks seem to be upset because they were kind of left out of the loop from the beginning. At least that's their perception. And I think that if that's how they view it, then they have a right to be upset. At the same time, we also need to find an opportunity to help folks. You're not holding their hands, but you're helping them to integrate back into their communities and back into society. So I don't think that it's clear cut in, yes, I support it, I wouldn't want it in my backyard, because I think that for a lot of folks there's a big NIMBY, not
Sure.
in my backyard.
Right.
But I do support in general the idea that we need to help folks ease back in, because if you just cut them off 28 days in detox and then you're out, well, that's obviously not working.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll ask you a question I've been asking all of the Republican candidates, and you mentioned, you used the phrase fighting the good fight, and that's what made me think of it. There is an imbalance on the State House. It is heavily Democratic. They certainly control the agenda. You have representatives like Jim Lyons, who I would say absolutely is the epitome of fighting the good fight, the loyal opposition type of thing. But on the other hand, there is a limit to what someone like Jim, any Republican, can get accomplished, how much power he can wield. What do you see as your ability, if you get elected? Certainly somebody like Jim Maselli, who sat on Ways and Means, he carried a big stick up there. If a Republican gets elected, if you get elected, are you going to be able to be effective for the district on Beacon Hill?
So I think that really the issue is that we only look at folks as being Democrat or Republican. If you go in doing the work that is requested of you by your community, regardless of party, then that should be your first priority. And for me, that is my first priority. Yes, I'm a conservative. Yes, I'm a registered Republican. I'm running as a Republican. But you're not only representing Republicans. You're representing the district as a whole. And so I'm not in the same situation as maybe some of the Democrats running, where if I want, a certain committee, if I want this or that, I'm at the absolute beck and call of the speaker, which is the case of a lot, you want to be on mental health, well then you better toe the line and support X, Y, and Z. I'm already, Republicans are outnumbered 5-1 in the legislature.
Right.
So there is already a certain stigma, for lack of a better term,
right,
for being a Republican. But Representative Maselli certainly did not abide to the Democrat, agenda for. So I think that if you go, he went in to the State House every day and worked hard for the district, and I think that's really the only way you should look at this. Mm-hmm. Any good, respected representative would fight for their community, and party really comes second.
What are some of your core beliefs and I won't say as a Republican, but just as a citizen? What are some of your core beliefs, core values that you would want to bring to Beacon Hill?
Sure. So for me, it's really about helping those who can, or in a position where they're in need. You should absolutely be, a helping hand, not a handout, but a helping hand. And so for me, it really is, how can we help folks and then transition them out of, how can we make their lives better? How can we get them into a position where they're not necessarily in need for an extended period of time? How can we make the process easier? So I think a lot of people, as a Republican, you should want to end welfare, but for me, it's really, you help people who are in need. That's why I volunteer at the food pantry. And it's, it's great when you see numbers each month, if they go down or they go up. It's, people don't need it that month. And if we continue to put people into a situation where they're absolutely reliant upon state aid, and there's no way to transition them off, it's either you're all in or you're all out, I think it makes it difficult for folks to really get ahead. And so for me, I'd like to help facilitate a you are and then you are, and it's not cut and dry.
I see.
Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Absolutely. One of the things that's been talked about nationally with the new Supreme Court nominee is that there is a chance down the road that states may wind up having some more local authority to control abortion laws, as relates to restrictions, as it relates to funding for that. If that were to happen, and the states do have more control over that, where do you stand on that in terms of restrictions and in terms of funding for groups like Planned Parenthood? Sure.
So I'm pro-life. I think that it's strange that we use taxpayer dollars. In general, taxpayer dollars have gone to fund abortions. I don't necessarily support that. I think that that's not something the state should be supplementing. So for me, that's not something I
Sure.
necessarily would support.
Yeah.
I can't, you can't really answer something like that because it's a hypothetical. But
Sure.
yeah, but for me, that's kind of where I land. I'm pro-life.
Okay.
I don't think the taxpayer dollars should be going towards funding abortions.
Sure.
Yeah.
As you've gone out talking to people, shaking hands and whatnot, what and as a first-time candidate, this is something I've been asking all the first-time candidates, what have you been trying to let people know about you? What do people need to know about Erin Buckley, the person?
Sure. So I worked right after I graduated high school and I had to work. I couldn't go to college. I waited tables. I worked my way through my 20s. I moved to Tewksbury. I was working and decided this is just not what I want to change my life. My husband and I took a calculated risk. I went to Salem State. I graduated top of my class and really kind of delved into my community. And so for me, again, this is about helping Tewksbury and Wilmington. This is about being, because constituent services should be the bread and butter of whoever the Representative Lyons or whoever in the Commonwealth. Your bread and butter should be wanting to help your constituents. And so I'm not going to go in with an agenda and say I want to file this bill and I want to file that bill. I want there to be as seamless a transition as possible in terms of services and support given to the community, because that was what was really great. Representative Maselli did a really great job of ensuring that constituent services was a priority, and for me that is first and foremost the only priority, and then everything kind of comes secondarily.
You're involved in a lot of groups and volunteering and whatnot. One of the ways, you mentioned Representative Maselli, one of the things people always said about him was if there was an event going on in Wilmington or Tewksbury, he was there. You always saw him. And he made himself very available to people to talk to and whatnot. Is that something, if you do get elected, is that something that you plan on doing, is being very visible in the district and being at events, talking to people, that type of thing?
So absolutely. So each card, so I have my push cards, I knock on the door. If they're not home, I leave my phone number on everything. Call me when, I got a text message last night at 10:30. Normally I'm asleep because I'm, an old lady, but absolutely, I have no problem. I desire to be a part of the community, and I'm already a part of the community, and that would only continue more. Right now, every time I knock a door, I say, please call anytime. If you have any questions, you call anytime. I'll answer my phone, I promise. This doesn't stop, doesn't stop just because I get elected. It only continues, tenfold.
Excellent. All right. If people want to know more about you, want to know more about the campaign, want to reach out, how can they find information about you?
Sure. So my website is electerinbuckley.com. The Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook are all Buckley for Rep, and that's probably the best and easiest way to get a hold of me.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate the time, appreciate the information, and I know that as we get closer to the primary is September 4th, of course, and I know that we'll get a chance to talk to you more as we go along.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You have a great day.